All right, hello everybody. This is Randy Harrington here. I have a friend of mine named Sean, and you've heard me mention on a couple of videos before about a gentleman who reached out to me last time I was down in my Kiamichi Ridge. I call it my Kiamichi Ridge only because I've spent 20 years there, but it's not mine. It's public land. Anybody's welcome to go up there, and as long as you report back to me if anything happens to you up there, because I need to know. But yeah, Sean reached out to me. We've got lots of mutual friends, and one of our great mutual friends is Mark. And you guys probably know I did a video with Mark about his cabin, the incidents around his cabin that he built over a course of probably 10 years, maybe or
Yeah.
less, somewhere around that time frame. So he took a long time to build this cabin because he built it all himself. So he's had some incidents happen there, but Sean is a mutual friend of us of ours, and Sean and I met briefly maybe a decade ago, and and we, yeah, and we know lots of the same people, so it's kind
Right.
of funny how many times I go back down there, and lo and behold, he's within 15 miles of my ridge, in a really nice hub, a location where it's almost a center hub of all of these things going on. But man, fill us in on anything that you want to fill us in on, where this all started, how you picked the spot for your
Right.
cabin, and all that's entailed.
So this all started probably back in 2008. Lost my deer lease in Crockett, Texas, and hadn't gone hunting for a couple of years and was getting kind of itchy. I needed to get out in the woods. I needed to go camping. I needed to do something out in the wilderness. And went down the old Google rabbit hole and came across some Bigfoot expeditions. Um, Paid my fee, went. I thought it was going to be kind of a joke. Honestly, really, a Bigfoot expedition. I thought I'd just go sit around the campfire, have some beers, listen to some stories, and well, lo and behold, I got hooked. The first time was probably 2008, 2009. Like I said, it was in Honey Grove. It was with the BFRO. Matt Moneymaker had come down. It had snowed that night, and we had at least one come into our camp and went through our coolers, and so that kind of got me hooked. And within a year, I had been on 3 or 4 different expeditions, and they were all up in the Kiamichis near Honolulu. The first one that I'd been to was Honolulu, and everybody knows about Honolulu. And um, uh, the first expedition that was there in Honolulu was literally a half mile from where the siege happened, on the same creek. And we had wood knocks, we had calls, a number of sightings on the first night, that Friday night. And of course, back in 2002, 2008, 2009, a recordable thermal was pretty rare. And if you were able to get your hands on one, extremely, extremely expensive. So we were able to, I was not able to see it through the thermal. I was in a different group, but I did hear the calls in the wood knocks. And that just,
Well, hey, it's funny how you mentioned how we all come across equipment as it's affordable, and that's about the time I got completely sold on thermal cameras, because I worked at a fire department here outside of Kansas City, and we had just gotten our first Bullard for our driver, to use on fire scenes, and so we were doing training with them. So it was these big, gaudy handheld units that you'd
right.
charge in the trucks and you pull them out. But we'd go into these smoky houses, man, and I could see footprints through the smoke, and
Yeah.
and I was this was after I'd had my encounter down in the Chickasaw Park. So I was like, I have got to get one of these things. But at the time, they were like $25,000, and So yeah, so I understand what you're
So
saying.
the one I ended up getting was, I think it was $3,500, and it was little, it was black and white. Um, but the first thing I ended up getting was night vision, which if you're going to get night vision, save the money up and get a thermal. But I digress. Let's go back to my incidents or so got to started getting into it a little bit, had 3 or 4 more expeditions with the BFRO and a couple that, spin-off groups there in the Kiamichis and the Wachitas, and absolutely fell in love with that area. It's gorgeous. People think of Oklahoma as flat, barren, flyover country, not Southeast Oklahoma. It is absolutely stunning. And that first or second trip is when I met Mark. And we really hit it off, like the same kind of music, and he kind of filled me in on what's happening in that neck of the woods. And as he was building his cabin, I would go up there, and I wish I could say I helped him, but um, so did that, and Mark and I and a bunch of other people would go up in the mountains and use our night vision, or whoever had night vision or thermal, and try to make calls and things like that. And we would make calls off of Mark's deck, off his cabin, and we always ended up getting wood knocks or calls back. It was pretty neat. And so I kind of left BFRO, and there was probably about 15, 20 of us that would just do our own expeditions. And we started going down to the big thicket, Coal Springs to be exact. And every time we went down there, we were getting wood knocks, calls, rocks thrown. But from the time I started the whole expeditions and looking for the mystical Bigfoot, it took 7 years before I saw my first one. And that was down there in Coal Springs 8 years ago, I want to say, 7 or 8 years ago. My father was with me. It was 6 other guys, and we were camping in a cul-de-sac, and we had been out through the national park there, doing calls, whatnot, just trying to see if we could drum anything up. And there's right next to our campsite, probably 200 or 300 yards prior to the pull into that roundabout where our tents were, was a road called Spooky Lane, Spooky Road, something like that. I didn't name it, just saying that. But it had a gate that went in front, so you couldn't drive your car down there. And 2 guys pulled their truck up at the gate, and then 4 or 5 of us went down the road, and it went downhill, dogleg to the left. And the guy in the car was filming, and he actually had a makeshift recordable thermal. I don't know. He was very, very technical. We went down, and it was probably a quarter mile, no more than a half mile, dogleg, and we were coming back up. No issues whatsoever. Walk up to the truck. My dad's in the truck with my friend Tim. And they're like, "Who was that in front of y'all when you were coming back up?" We're like, "What? Who was that in front of you?" They came up the trail and peeled off to the left. We're all here. So we all scrambled. And as my friend Tim was going through his makeshift recordable thermal, we started seeing a large bipedal coming up, and then turn to the left and walk into the trees. And we were like, oh, excited. It was crazy. We were all pumped and everything. And we're like, oh, you got to save it. You got to do this. You got to do that. He deleted the file.
What?
Completely deleted the file. And it was just like, no.
Oh my goodness.
No. So we end up going back to the camp, And the way the campsite was, you pulled into this cul-de-sac, it was round, and on the back side, it was thinned out. And remember, this is the piney woods. So everything's really thick except for the back of this cul-de-sac. And we had our tents and everything. And there were 3 pickup trucks. I was in my father's, and it had a camper shell on the back. And everybody pulls in, and my father and I'm driving back the truck in to the campsite. So if you can imagine, let me see how to do this. Back the truck in, my dad gets out, drops the tailgate, and he's on the driver's side of the tailgate now. Right beside him is a pine tree and bushes below the pine tree. I can see them. And when you're out there, either pig hunting or Bigfoot hunting, whatever you're doing, you always have the dome light off, and then you got that really sexy looking spotlight on your forehead. And I had that. I had the dome light off, the spotlight on my forehead. And as I get out of the pickup truck, I look down and I see my father. Right behind my dad is the pine tree, and then there's this really big pine tree. It didn't dawn on me. My buddy Tim is walking in front of the truck, and he goes, there, and he's pointing Bigfoot, and he's pointing, and he's backing up. So what do? I get out of the truck and run around to the front. I look up, and we saw it run 65 feet across into these bushes. We had trapped this Bigfoot next to this pine tree when we backed in, and apparently he had ducked down in the bushes, and he was kind of stuck there. My dad walks around, drops the tailgate. He's standing there. It's my dad. It's a pickup truck with my dad, the pine tree, and him. And he was going to make a run for it, but that spotlight caught him off guard.
Kept him pinned.
Off.
Wow. Hey, can I throw something in there?
Yeah.
It's amazing that you're telling me some of these details, and I'm always going back in the Rolodex of my own head of things that I can compare that to. When you talk about, I'm going to be dropping a video here, hopefully within the next week or two, because it's going to be a long process, where Shane, I caught one on a thermal video in a field on this property that we've been at for 7 years now, and it was popping its head up out of the deep grass. And it was caught in a position where it couldn't go somewhere because it felt like it was being watched, so it was trying to stay laid. Well, anyways, Shane, I direct Shane to go out to it with my thermal camera, and Shane gets about 8 feet away and shines a light at it. It's a juvenile looking at him through the grass.
Oh, wow.
So what you just described is the same thing that I am going to describe, how you could see the nervousness of this thing looking up as Shane's approaching because it doesn't know what to do, and it lays prone. And at some point, it must decide that the risk of getting up and running is more extreme than laying there thinking Shane will walk on by it.
That's right.
That's amazing that you're describing practically the same thing.
Well, just with that, so we run around to the back side of the opposite side of the truck. This Bigfoot 65 feet in front of us now on the other side of the truck, bushes. I throw the thermal up. I'm yelling at my dad. First it was Dad, then it was Larry, and then expletives. Get over here. He finally comes around because I'm looking at this thing. My dad gets to look at it. That was my big thing was I see it. I want my dad to see it. He finally comes over. He's looking at it. The recordable thermal is to the right of where this Bigfoot is in another pickup truck. So, and everybody comes rushing to the side of the truck that we're at trying to see, and we're trying to push people back, trying to get people to rotate. So I've got a thermal on it. I've got night vision. Of course, neither one of them record. And Tim goes, I'm going to go over to the truck and get the recordable. So he and my dad walk over toward the truck. So this thing with the thermal, you could see just below the armpits up. And he looked like like a finch. His head was just kept going, looking at us, looking at my dad, looking at us, looking at dad and Tim. And it just kept going back and forth. Like it didn't know what to do. And so we're rotating. Tim's trying to figure out, first of all, he's got to power up the thermal, which takes time. And needless to say, we never got the recordable version of it. But it was really interesting, just the way you could tell he was nervous. And what makes this, I think, a really neat sighting is that 7 people got to see this thing, and it was for 14 minutes. He never moved for 14 minutes. Behind us, we started getting pelted with sticks, pine cones. Something behind us was saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And one of the guys who was holding the thermal turned around to look, didn't see anything, came back around, gone.
Amazing. Amazing.
So the cool part is, another cool part is we were able to, when he stood up, when we first pulled in and he was noticed when he stood up, his head was actually about 3 inches from the bottom of a branch. We were able to measure 7'6". He was probably almost 4 feet wide, shoulder to shoulder, looked like bowling balls on his shoulders. He was, from what you could see, he just kind of went down like this, almost like a V shape. Head sitting on top of his shoulders, way down. That's when you wish you would have spent the extra $1,500 on a recordable thermal.
Right, right. Well, I'm just getting into this where I'm actually talking to people, and I'm trying to think of a good name for my stuff. So as you can see on my name up here, I'm calling it the Sensible Bigfoot Project. I have never had anything paranormal happen. I've never seen any orbs. I've never had anything telepathically stick something in my thoughts that weren't my own thoughts to begin with of fear. So I'm trying to stay sensible about it. I've never had anything extraordinary happen. And when you're describing these behaviors, it is now known that these are so common that when one seems to be caught in a position that another one needs to interfere, that interference happens in a way where you look away and then you look back and they're gone. Sometimes that turns into somebody saying, well, it was so fast it must have went into a portal, or it must have cloaked, or all these. To me, that's silly talk. There's enough meat on the bone when it comes to these natural behaviors that it's fascinating enough. So I've got to stay in that file until something leads me otherwise. But there's plenty of meat on the bone with what we're talking about.
I'm in the same uh, mindset as you. I haven't seen the orbs, not to say that there aren't. I haven't seen portals, not to say that there's not. What I have seen is a flesh and blood animal. That's it. Just like a dog, chimpanzee, whatever it is, flesh and blood. Not to say that there isn't the woo factor. So that was my first encounter. Now we go back up to Oklahoma. I spent a lot of time at Mark's house. I live in North Texas, and where Mark lives, it's 3 hours and 15 minutes. So it was easy just to get in the car after work on Friday, zoom up, drink beers on the back porch, go fishing, do whatever. And we've got, near Mark is a very large deer lease, and I'm a member of it. And Mark and I and about 3 or 4 other guys were back out on there, and we were shooting. I had just gotten a Judge pistol, shoots 45 long and 410 shells, and we were sitting on this bridge shooting and just cutting up. And Mark and I went back to the quads, and to the left where the quads were on this trail, it went up. And Mark and I are standing, just sitting there talking. This rock comes down off this bluff, comes down, and just goes right between us. We both looked at each other. We were just like, don't look up, don't look up, don't look up. Talking, and then another one. right between us. And then we were like, we got to look up. Couldn't see anything, and that was it. It was just like, hey, are you guys paying attention to me? Yeah,
I know, and
and
and you guys even knew at that point with all of your experiences that facing whatever's going on is
yeah.
will end it most of the time.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So, like I said earlier, I fell in love with the area. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And so after going up there 7, 8, 9 years, I was going up there all the time visiting Mark. Was able to come across 5 acres. It's got a creek that runs in the back, and ended up putting a cabin on it. I'm still on the deer lease, and then behind the cabin, probably maybe it's not even a half mile to the mountain, and then it goes up. But the property kind of drops off. There's a creek, and then it kind of slowly goes back up. Um, and it backs up and it goes toward your place. I don't know which one you call it. Not you there?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, there was a glitch.
Okay. One of your areas that you investigate or explore.
Just call it the base camp.
Base camp. At base camp. As a crow flies, I know pretty well where it's at. I'm about 4 miles, 5 miles, somewhere in that. But that's as a crow flies. Trying to get there by car is probably 15, 20 miles.
So, so if anybody watching this thinks I'm going to try to figure out where that spot is, find my base camp and then draw a 15-mile radius circle around that. Good luck.
Yeah. So I ended up buying this property, and like I said, it drops down in the back. There's a creek, um, and through all my expeditions and just going to conferences and stuff like that, you build up a pretty good group of friends with the same interest. And then you get to be Facebook friends with them, and they're naming their kids after you and stuff. But anyway, a buddy of mine, Chuck, was like, "Hey, the cabin's built. It's on property. Goes, can me and my son, during spring break, come down?" And I'm like, "Yeah, here's the keys. Go do what you want to do." And Chuck is a Bigfooter, an experiencer. I don't know if he's a researcher. He may be, but
But
he
he's a sightings. He's an encounter survivor.
yes, yes. And he called me on a Saturday afternoon, and he's like, "Dude, you got stick structures, you've got this, you got that." I'm like, as much as was into the Bigfoot thing, I don't want that on my property. It's just like it's cool if it's over at your base camp, or it's cool if it's over at Mark's, but it's not cool on my property. So,
Isn't that why Mark didn't put any windows on the back side of his cabin? Because he don't want one coming down and looking through his cabin window.
that's right. Uh, so he was all excited, and he goes, "I got a present for you." And I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "There was a trackway behind your cabin through the mud. And if everything goes well, you're going to have the best track." And he ended up giving it to me, and it's good. It's got dermal ridges on the bottom of the foot, and it's only like 9 or 10 inches. It's like this. It's definitely a juvenile, real fat at the front, fat ankle. And 2 weeks later, once again, and I had posted on Facebook, "Hey, I'm at my cabin, this and that." So some Bigfoot friends of mine from the Denver area, Denver, Colorado, I get a thing from my buddy Chad, and he's like, "Hey, do you have a place here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he starts to talk, and I'm like, come on down. Just come on. So he brought three, there were three of them that came in. Off the back deck, we had thermal hits, had some calls. I took them out on the deer lease, and they had a thermal hit, samurai chatter, and this was only 3 nights. And they had to get up early to fly out of DFW, and I think it was probably it was 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. The way the cabin is set up, there's a front door and then a bedroom to the left, and then there's a half bath across the hall. The door is part glass, but you can't really see through. You can see shadows and objects, but you really can't see detail. I had two guys in the front bedroom, and there was a guy that was sleeping on the couch in the living room. Well, one of the guys got up to go relieve himself in the bathroom, and as he crosses the hall, he looks over and he can see this figure outlined in the window, and you can hear this. And as he goes, he's standing there relieving himself, and then it dawned on him. He stopped, pinched it off, whatever you want to call it, sticks his head back out. The guy that was sitting or sleeping in the living room had heard my buddy get up to go to the bathroom. He's like, I gotta go too, so I'll just stand here and wait. He stood there and he was watching something about 5'6", 5'7", trying to get in to the cabin. And when my buddy poked his head out of the bathroom, I guess the way the light was, it was able to see him move, and then it took off. And of course, nobody tells me about this until the next morning when they get up, and nobody checked the front door after this incident. When they got up to leave, the front door was wide open. So whatever it was, well, we know, I'm going to tell you what it is in a minute, had opened the door after it had run off. It had come back. So they're telling me all this stuff. And I was sleeping in the master bedroom. Nobody came and told me. You know, I saw them off and they were like, oh, yeah, you might want to start deadbolting the doors, because after we went back to bed, after this one was at the front door, the door was open. So now the joke at the cabin is deadbolt the front and back door. And you won't believe, the non-believers will be the first ones to deadbolt those doors. They're just like, yeah. So Chuck calls me, because Chuck knows he's a gentleman from Colorado. Chuck goes, well, did you have anything? And I'm going through everything. And Chuck goes, oh, wait a minute. And I hadn't told Chuck about the front door incident yet. And Chuck and his son were sleeping in the front bedroom. Chuck goes, oh, wait a minute. I meant to tell you, there was one that had come up on the front porch and had tried to get in the front door twice in one night. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. That wasn't the exact phrase, but you got to be kidding me. I said, that's what happened to us Sunday night. So that was in the spring, and it was 4 years ago, 2019 it was before COVID. So I started spending more time up at the cabin during the summer and things like that. And on five separate occasions when I was up there. So the cabin, it's 48 by 32, and there's motion lights on all four corners. And there would be this one that would come out of the woods, and she'd loop around to the front door, only setting off the motion camera near the front door. The master bedroom is at the front of the house, and I would sleep with the blinds open. And when you're out in rural countryside where your electricity comes into the property, there's a big light pole. So the front of the house, I say the front of the house, it's 100 yards away, but it illuminates the field out in front. And the first time I saw her, and I'll tell you how I know it's a her. Um, she came out of the woods, came around right in front of the house, about 30 feet in front of the house, came around, and I just was laying there and got all excited. She came up on the porch, and since it's a cabin, it's kind of squeaky a little bit. And I got out of the bed, and the bed and the floor squeaked, and off she went. This happened again the next time I was up there. I tried this time. She came up, and I was kind of ready. I was taking naps during the day just so I could stay up and see if she'd come around. She came around, and I was ready this time, and I had some blankets down on the floor, so when I stepped down, it wouldn't squeak. I was able to put my face up against the window, and she's only about 15 feet, but she was so close to the door, I could only see the back of her head, a little bit of her back, a little bit of her butt. And I tried to get my phone up against the window. It just doesn't work.
So her main area of interest means that she knows that that door is the entryway in and out. So that seems to be her main focus, is that front door.
And that's what it was. So I'm going to describe to you what she looked like. So she was 5'6", 5'7", and I'm going to describe to you how she looked, but I had seen her prior to this, and I'll go over that as well. 5'6", 5'7", real lanky, almost like a preteen girl, just kind of concaved a little bit. Big head. She had a very big head. She almost looked malnutrition, like she just wasn't eating a lot. Long arms. And I had seen a picture, and I've looked for this picture for years now. And I saw a picture of somebody had drawn one. And I don't know if it was a male or female, but very lanky, Bigfoot, skinny. And I can't find it. But over the course of a month, she had come around and tried to get in the front door. Toward the end, it was just like, hey, just to run her off. It was just, okay, I get it.
Have you ever thought, what do you think her thought processes are? I mean, we already are under the understanding that they're very close to human in their mannerisms and behaviors, not given what they look like on the outside of their body. The inside of their body, they seem to be very human-like. What do you think her goal is by possibly wanting to get in the cabin while people are in the cabin? What do you think her end game is?
So the back of the cabin, there's like 10 windows, and it overlooks the living room and the kitchen and dining room. So when they're out on the back, they can see what's going on. When I get there, if any creepers come trying to look in my windows, I'm gonna get you. But she's seeing what's going on, and I've seen the female, and I've seen partial of the male. So I know there's three, a mother, father, and her. I think she's just intrigued on what's going on. And of course, it's always at night. So whatever she sees with the lights on, I get the feeling she's like, oh, I want to. The mother is always around. And everybody's going to say, well, why didn't you put cameras up? So this is the first 6 months, 7 months that I had the cabin up and built. I ended up putting cameras up for security reasons, and a lot of the activity just went out because there were cameras up in eaves and everything else. You don't know what kind of people are running around up in the mountains up there. So it was for security. It wasn't to catch them or anything else like that. But at that time also, the cameras were working sometimes and sometimes not. The power up there goes out, and when it goes out,
You have to reset.
it resets or it just doesn't even come back on. So prior to all that, and between the two groups of guys that had the front door opening, I had come up. I just had a garage built at the front of the house, and I had all my stuff on the back porch. And I'd come up one Friday night and started moving everything that was on the back porch to the garage. And I guess about the third trip, I thought, oh, I'm just going to make a call. Yeah, why not? Made a call, and I got this. It wasn't a whoop, and I can't describe. Wasn't a whoop. It wasn't a scream, but somewhere in there. But it was very high pitched, like a girl did it. And of course, I wasn't expecting it. It was more of a joke for me to do it. So every time I would go back and forth, I would make this call, and she would call back. And about 4 or 5 times after I've got everything in, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go down to the deck, have a beer. And I grabbed my thermal, the one that does not record, went down there. I was like, I wonder if she's still around. I called, or I wonder if it's still around. I don't know if it's a male or female yet. And sure enough, she was to the right of the cabin in some very low grass. And you know how chimpanzees sit on their heels and their knees are kind of spread out? She must have been there for a good hour and a half, and she was just in the pine needles. I don't know what she was doing there, but she was just on her knees, or knees out and spread like that. And then she was kind of hopping around with her hands and just playing around. And I had a clear enough view that I could tell it was a female and not a male by the way she was sitting. And then,
But she was clearly exposing her genitalia.
Oh yeah. You would be able to see dangly parts if
when you were describing her being down on her heels with her,
yeah,
it reminds me of Asian people working in the rice paddies. They're
exactly.
That's such a natural position for them because they do it so often that they seem to be very comfortable in that position, where you and I might have a little stiff hips to do something like that, but to them it's not.
Yeah, it was natural. And I was able, further back in the woods, I saw a figure which kind of walked behind her, probably 50, 60 yards, maybe 6 foot, if that, of another one. That was more like a patty built, very, very barrel chested, short legs, long arms. I think I saw breasts, but at 150 yards through an older thermal, it's kind of hard to really get any kind of detail. Because the young one was no more than 50 yards away where she was at. And then, so I've had this stuff kind of going on throughout the past five years. Now, what's kind of interesting is it's died down. I do have cameras, and up until recently, I could never keep them running, just because of the outages and that sort of thing. But my friends would go up with their families and things like that, and they would sit out on the deck and they would hear wood knocks, and people would be where the deck is, it drops about 30 feet, and there's a nice little swimming hole down there. And people would be swimming, and all of a sudden they'd be like, yeah, something's watching me down here, and they'd hear something walking bipedal on the south side of the creek, that sort of thing. But typically they would get some wood knocks, not a whole lot of calling out there. And then they'd come in at night and then the cabin might get slapped, that sort of thing. My fiance and they were there a couple of years ago. We were just watching TV and slap on the side of the cabin and it shakes the cabin. It's a pier and beam home and it shakes it really good. Not too, they don't, I'm not afraid of them. They don't really bother me. When I'm there, I very, very seldom see them or hear them or anything like that. It's when strangers come up, they will come and check it out, what's going on. And probably 50% of the time when somebody's up there or a group of people that are up there, they'll have something happen where it's just like, yeah, those are wood knocks, or that's a slap on the cabin, that sort of thing. So there's that going on. And then out on the deer lease, I've always got people telling me, hey, I was having coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning and across the creek, I thought it was Bill setting up his deer blind at 6 a.m. in the morning. And it just happens to walk. And I yell, Bill, and it looks at me. Yeah, that's not Bill. And it just walks off and there's chatter. There's not a lot. You'll hear calls, screams, that sort of stuff. I've had friends that were about 10 miles back on the deer lease with RVs. And when they were up there, they were getting calls from different mountaintops, rocks thrown at the cabin or at their RVs and stuff like that. So they're like, okay, we've had enough of this. So they bring it down close to the gate. It still happens, but they feel safer. I have no issues. I don't think they're aggressive where I'm at. And I could be wrong. I've never had an aggressive encounter with one. I did have one yell at me, and I'll go into that in a minute, but they just, with the loggers, with the hunters, that sort of stuff, it's live and let live. There's no pressure.
You almost described it when the guy up on the hunting lease saw one that he thought was his friend Bill, and he says, "Hey, Bill," and it looks at him. It's almost like, to me, the demeanor of most, and I've never had any aggressive at all, even as close as we've gotten to things. Yeah. But it's almost like once they get caught in the open, they're like, well, F it. They caught me. I'm just going to mosey on over here. Hey.
Yeah.
It's like they don't work too hard. Once they get caught in the open, it's kind of like more of a nonchalant. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and walk on over and then I'll get hidden.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the way it's been. And, one winter, 3 years, 4 years, it was just before COVID. So, probably December of 19, we had a snowstorm come through and the wind was gusting out of the north. And I had gone down on the deck to see what the creek looked like. And I've got a huge like stadium light that when you click it on, it illuminates the whole creek down at the bottom, so you can swim at night and that sort of stuff. And I clicked it on. Now, the wind is gusting toward the south, getting pelted with snow in my back. I had apparently upset and bet my life on it. It was a male that was down there. He yelled, and it was just one of those chest punches. Whoa! And I was just like, and I could feel it inside. It just reverberated everything in my body. And I was just like, yeah. And I just shut the light off and walked back up. I had that encounter. I say it's an encounter. What would that be? A class B? I don't know. But the force that came out to go against the gusting wind, and for me to feel it had to have been extremely big. And then
Well, it's at least interesting that you
yeah,
recognize that that was in response to the light. It didn't
yeah,
have anything to do with him trying to intimidate you or or whatever.
yeah,
It was his response to all of a sudden a nocturnal visioned animal or person or whatever they are
yeah.
is almost half blinded by bright lights. Well, he's going to be angry at the
I,
light.
I didn't even think about that. I didn't. And you know, as I go and I tell you my experiences and stuff, when I am not there at the cabin and my friends are there, they are having something going on. You know, my daughter was there a couple years ago. Um, she's out of college now, but she was in college with a couple of her girlfriends on the weekend. They're down at the creek swimming, drinking beers, whatever girls do. She called me and said, "Dad, what's the code to get into the cameras?" I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, something keeps smacking the side of the cabin." You know, and I'm like, "Honey, I don't know if it's even working." She's like, "Oh, okay." I mean, she's known that I've been around. It's just like, okay, they're just messing with us, you know, seeing if we're paying attention. And a lot of this stuff, I feel like almost like what can I get away with before they notice? You know, are they paying attention? You know, can I run back and forth on the other side of the creek? Are they going to notice, or are they too busy up there drinking wine or, you know, roasting marshmallows kind of thing? So,
Well,
and
sounds like the perfect scenario for my drone. I mean, just all you got to do is just hang out there and if you think that you're being watched on the mountainside through those back windows of your cabin,
yeah.
occasionally throw the drone up there and look for any heat signatures up on the side of that hill.
Well, I think the lease uh, is the best place because they seem to come down a lot more. Um, my interaction with them or any experiences I've had with them lately are very few and far between. Not to say that they're not out there. It's just like, oh, it's Sean, he's here, whatever, you know. But on the lease, we got some stuff. But I did have something that happened to me 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Sorry, 3 years ago. I had gone down the rabbit hole and found this South American whistle. That's all I'm going to say. And I ended up buying one, and it's a scary screaming whistle. And
Is it
uh,
one of those death whistles?
I wasn't going to give that away because what I ended up having done to me, I, we don't, well, it doesn't even come out at the cabin. Um, but I had gone out, it was on a Sunday night, Labor Day was that Monday. I was there up there by myself with my two dogs. And like I said, I always open up all the blinds because it's just gorgeous. And it was about 11 o'clock at night. And I went out there. I wonder if this thing works. And I blew the heck out of it. Immediately, I got three wood knocks or three different areas of wood knocks. Just boom, 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 boom. And it like right there off the back deck. It was going off. And then I got a roar. I'm like, that's it. And I come inside in that dread feeling. I got a horrible dreaded feeling. And then my dog started pacing the back of the house where the windows are. And I have never felt like that over but 15 years I've been doing this. I have never had that dread feeling ever. Ended up closing the blinds, and then the dogs are going to the front windows now, and they're going back and forth and growling, and they're just so something was there. Was it them? I would say it is, but I don't have any proof. I ended up sleeping with my rifle next to me when I could sleep because I was terrified.
Well, I will throw this in about the 400 location that Shane and I do at the Southern Missouri. The males tracks impressions that he has found. He's never found them in the bottom areas where it's always the female and the juveniles. They seem to be the foragers and the lookers for food and stuff like that. The males tracks, on the other hand, seems to be on the upper part of the property along the perceived boundary lines.
Right.
Like maybe he patrols the boundaries. We've never found any bear tracks, never found any wild hog tracks. It's almost like nothing can get past that boundary without him snatching it up if it's one of those type of animals. But
Right.
it's also seems to be he guards the border. And so to me, what you just described could possibly be the biggest threat that deserves an answer would be another large male coming into the area. And that
Yeah.
may have been how they perceived what that call is that you did.
Well, like I said, I got hardly any sleep that night. I mean, I was just, I hate, I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to go outside to get in my truck and go. It was that bad. So I tell my buddies in Colorado, and I tell my buddy Chuck, I'm like, hey, this is kind of what happened to me. So what do? They go out and they get one. They're on an expedition. The guys in Colorado are on an expedition with paid customers. They blow this thing, sticks that hold red, sticks being thrown. It got really creepy really fast. Chuck does the same thing in Oklahoma. Same thing. It was just like, that's it. So I give the call to my nephew down in Houston, where he lives in the city. He could scare all the neighbors he wants with it, but
Yeah, I'd never want to escalate things to the point where it's uncomfortable.
yeah, and that's what it was. But other than that, uh, not too much more. I was never a researcher, more of an experiencer. I love listening to podcasts. I mean, I go to bed listening to them. I prefer listening to stories than to researchers. Oh, this is what we did. I want to hear the stories. What did you see? How did you feel? Um, what did it do when it saw you? Did it pace you out of the woods? Did it follow you? Was it throwing things at you? What did it do? So when I come in contact, or if I'm out on the lease, and that's where most likely I'm going to run into one, is out on my lease, turkey hunting, deer hunting, bear hunting, hog hunting. That's where I'm going to run into one. And I tell all my friends that are on the lease, hunters, if you come across one, if there's one, there's two. There's two, there's three. You shoot one, you got two more. Best thing to do, palms out, look down, I'm your buddy, you know. Um, don't pick up that weapon and just back out. Um, like I said, I haven't had an aggressive experience except for what happened with that whistle. I don't know what it was. I got a feeling I know what it is, but I wasn't looking out the window, so I don't know. But I've been on this deer at least 5 years, 6 years. Never had anything. I walk out there at night. I'm more concerned about the bears and the mountain lions. They took a 700-pound bear off of the lease 2 years ago. Big old black bear. They're really not going to mess with you. It's going to be the mountain lion that's going to get you. So that's the way I look at it. I don't have any issues walking out in the woods at night, anything like that. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I want all my listeners to know that this is still a highly active area. It doesn't mean that you went through the part where you built your cabin, you purchased the land, you built the cabin. So there was an initial phase where you were interesting. You were very interesting to what was going on because it was new. But now it's not so much they know where your cabin is, and they satiated their curiosity enough about who you are and what's going on there that they don't have to visit it every night to not know what's going on there. But if you know if your daughter and her friends show up and are swimming late at night, well, that's certainly going to be an interesting thing for them to look at.
Oh, that's
So
right.
so yeah, but I just want everybody to know that in a few weeks, at the end of this coming month, I plan on spending a couple of nights with Sean and our mutual friend Mark. I was talking to Mark earlier on the phone. He was like, "Yeah, you definitely got to let me know when y'all are going to be down there uh, by Broken Bow, because he wants to show up and tell me of an incident in that place that we're going to be camping at." So I'm very excited about that. We're going to play with the drone. I want to go down to Buffalo Creek, with some areas there, and sit out in chairs with some of these women that are going to be with us, and hopefully be an attractant, and then throw that drone up occasionally. But I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in person, and just enjoying the process of this whole thing, that we're all mutually respectful of what's going on out there in the woods, and just enjoy the process. So
Right.
yeah, yeah. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing what you did, or what you've got in
Oh
your
yeah.
experiences. But yeah, it's fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah. Whenever you want to come, or when you do come, I'll put you on some. It's just you just got to know where, and you got a 50-50 shot. So
Well, can you bring that foot track when
yes, I
because
will.
Shane is the foot track guy from the 400, and I don't know if you've seen any of our videos with the foot trackways that have been found, and they're all seem to be juveniles. So he is going to be extremely interested in looking at your casted track.
Oh, it's one of the best ones I've seen. Chuck did a really good job on it, and I've actually got it framed in a picture box, so nothing can happen to it. So
Nice, nice.
yeah. You have any other questions?
No, no, that's
No.
it, man. I appreciate you. You have no idea how much I appreciate you.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. So
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and kill this recording, and we will get going then. Thank you,
all right.
everyone.